Hey guys, I hope that you are doing well on this, what is a rainy day here. And rain, man, always makes you want to rest and feel like you're tired and lethargic. I don't know, at least it does. It does for me. But today we're in Genesis chapter 9, which does not make you feel tired and lethargic because there's some incredible stuff in here, right? There's such good promises from God and so many cool things we see, right? The flood is gone. The flood ended last week. Noah and his family come out. Right, and after Noah and his family come out, right, the first thing he does is he worships, he sacrifices, he builds an altar to the Lord, and we talked about how Yahweh then promised to not flood the earth again, and then after that, after Yahweh's promise, right, to not flood the earth again, or never again curse the ground because of human beings, even though the inclination is still there, right? He says, God bless Noah and his sons and said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. Where do we see that? Well, we see that in the very beginning of Genesis 1, right? In Genesis 2, when God creates humanity, what does he tell them to do? He tells them to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. And so what do we see here? We see that, like we talked about last week, there's so many recreation themes here, right? God, in the very beginning, took chaos and brought it to order. Right, and then he created all these things, and then in the flood, he took it back into chaos, right? The flood waters were chaotic, and now he's bringing it back into order. And part of that is, even though there's still sin, even though there's still evil, even though there's evil in our imaginations, even though there's still disobedience that exists, the blessing never goes away. The blessing never went away. God gives the blessing and the mandate now to Noah and his family, right? Because the rest of humanity has been taken away and wiped off, and now God gives it to Noah and his family, right, as a result of this. And so then it says, the fear and terror of you will be in every living creature on the earth. And so there you see, right, we learn that sin affects every relationship we have. It affects our relationship with God. It affects our relationship with other people. It affects our relationship with ourselves, and it reflects our relationship with creation, with animals. There is now fear that did not exist before, that now exists in animals as a result of human. But it says they are placed under your authority, just like he did when it was Adam at the very beginning. He says they're still under your authority. Every creature that lives and moves will be food for you, as I gave you the green plants. I've given you everything. And so now God does change things a little bit from what we saw in the original creation. Now it's not just green plants. They are now allowed to eat animals, but they can't eat animals with its lifeblood in it, right? But not only that, right, he says, I will require some kind of penalty, right, if you eat an animal with lifeblood in it. But then he also starts talking about if there's bloodshed, if there is a murder that happens, then whoever sheds human blood is going to be punished, right? There is this, and it says that they will be punished by a fellow human, by another human. And so really we see the first signs of this idea, and what a lot of people will tell you is this is where a lot of people get the idea of capital punishment from. We see the first signs of God saying that humanity is going to be involved in the justice process, that humanity is going to be involved in how I hold people accountable and how I exact justice on all of humanity, on people. I'm going to involve other humans in this process. This is the beginnings of the justice and legal systems that we see, that God is a God who it's God's responsibility to exact vengeance, but he uses human institutions and humans to do that. That's why we still have the courts, and we still have police, and we still have all of these things, right? It all points back to Genesis chapter 9. But then he looks back at him and he says, but you be fruitful and multiply, spread out over the earth and multiply. And so there you see again the blessing, the mandate given. And God told Noah and his sons, I am establishing my covenant with you and with your descendants and with every living creature that is with you, right? I'm establishing my covenant with you that never again will every creature be wiped out by floodwaters. There will never again be another flood to destroy the earth. And so we see, again, there's the covenant that God has given them as a result of Noah's blamelessness and righteousness, as a result of his worship and sacrifice. God gives them this covenant, and he says there's going to be a sign of this covenant. And this sign of this covenant that I'm making with every living creature is going to be my bow hung up. Because I'm not gonna destroy the earth again. So I'm hanging up my bow in the clouds. and it's going to be a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. And so I think that this is interesting. I think the rainbow is a very interesting sign of this covenant. And a lot of people say that the rainbow is, when you look at a rainbow, right, it is a universal covenant, and you kind of know that from it going from, it's on the horizon. It's from horizon to horizon, right? It's universal. It's for everyone, but also it's from heaven to earth, that God's promises to protect humanity and earth. And the reason that we see the rainbow from heaven to earth is because of God's promise to protect, right, earth. And so he says that he's going to, when he does that, he's not going to destroy it again, because he's going to see the rainbow, and this is going to be the sign of the covenant. And then you see some issues happen with Noah and his sons. And so before we get there, just want to do a little bit of recap. So you see blessing still, you see disobedience still, you see the first mandate and vocation of all of these things. You see all of that. The humans still have dominion and relationship, but relationship with self and God and humanity and creation is going to be strained, right? And so you see all of this in the beginning of Genesis, right? And then you see some information about Noah and his sons. And it says that Noah, as a man of the soil, began by planting a vineyard. So Noah planted a vineyard. There's human advancement going on. There's wine making happening, right? And just like anything, wine making and wine drinking in and of itself is not evil. It's about your intent. It's about your motive. It's about how much of it, whether or not you do it in moderation, right? But Noah drank too much. And so as a result of that, he became drunk, and he uncovered himself in his tent. And so his drunkenness caused him to make a decision to uncover himself in this tent. And then it says Ham, the father of Canaan, right, which is important because of the later relationship between the Canaanites and the Israelites. The father of Canaan came in, saw his father naked, and then went out back outside and told his two brothers. And so the reality is that this is an interesting thing, because we know that Canaan was cursed as a result of this sin of Ham, right? He saw Noah naked, and then he went and told his brothers. And there's so many people that believe different things about this. Some people say it could be sexual in nature. Some people say it could be just about the fact that he dishonored his father. Some people could say that his father was in a vulnerable state, and he attacked that vulnerability and did not allow mystery to remain. Some people say that it was just that his privacy was invaded. Some people say that he castrated. Some people say that there was sodomy involved. Some people say that he was just looking at him searchingly. Some people say that there could have been homosexual voyeurism going on, right? We know that at the very least he dishonored his father, right? And we also see the sexual perversions that exist in the Canaanites in the future. And so some people read that back into the text and say, well, if this was true about the future Canaanites, perhaps this was true about their father Ham, right? And so we see all of these different things. We see that there could have been any of these things in there. And we don't know exactly what the sin was, but we do know that his father was in a vulnerable place, his father, and rather than helping his dad, he went and then he told his two brothers, and then his two brothers came, they covered his dad up. And so one son gets cursed, the other two sons get blessed as a result of this. And so a couple of things that we can learn about this. We know that the curse of the Canaanites happened as a result of this action from this man. And in other words, anybody who practices alternatives to obeying the sovereignty and trusting the graciousness of God, then they are going to experience some devastating consequences as a result of all of this. Right? We learn that human advancement, like winemaking, can be distorted by human depravity. Right? His drunkenness and his uncovering himself are eventually condemned. And we know that nakedness in the Bible is shame, vulnerability, it's demeaning, it is incompatible with God's presence. And so his son sees him like that. Instead of protecting him and taking care of him, he dishonors his father and dishonors that relationship. And as a result of that, he ends up, and his people behind him get cursed. And we learn a lot about God through this. We learn about God's judgments. They're not arbitrary. They're announced beforehand. They allow time for repentance. They result in death, and they're due to the justice of God. But we also learn a lot about humanity in this day and time. We learn that God is going to always preserve a remnant, that God is going to be the one who takes vengeance and gets justice, but he wants to involve us in this thing. And he wants us to have some kind of a ability to hold people accountable. He delegates responsibility for this, right? We see that the flood undid the blessing, but then God gave them the blessing and the mandate back. We see Ham's sin parallel the fall. Here's how it always happens for humanity. It happened with Adam and Eve. It happened again with Ham. He is betrayed by his eyes, and then they try to entice other people to join. Adam and Eve, they saw that the fruit was good and pleasing to the eye, and so they ate it, and then she enticed Adam. She gave it to Adam. This is how sin always happens. It is, we are betrayed by our eyes. We are enticed by something, and then we seek to get others to join in on that. And so I don't know exactly what all happened in the result of that, but I do know that what he did was disobedient to God. And it led not only to it affecting him, but also all of the Canaanites, his people, all the way down. We see the Canaanites and their sexual perversions. We see the Canaanites and their disunity with Israel. All of that comes from this place here. But God makes a promise that he's not going to punish humanity as a whole again. But individuals and families and peoples, case by case, will perhaps be judged. But as we've seen before in Genesis, we see that God is a God of justice and judgment, but also Yahweh's grace shines through, and sin is going to always remain, but so will the blessing of God. One of the things that we can learn is that we are all trapped, perhaps enticed by our eyes, and we cannot even let sin remain in a small corner in our life, because when it does, it leads to so much brokenness. And so know this, just like Ham, that we have consequences of sin. That sin doesn't only affect us, it affects our relationship with God, it affects our relationship with other people, it affects ourselves, and it affects our relationship with creation. It impacts so many more people down the line than we never think it will. Right? God is a God of justice and judgment, but God is also a God of grace. And so we see that it really does, that the blessing and the mandate still exists, that God's promise is not to take out the whole world, but there are consequences to our sin, right? And we have to do everything we can to fight against it. We have to be Noah's other two sons, who when we see vulnerability, when we see sin, when we see shame, when we see somebody not in God's presence, when we see somebody being disobedient to God, we have to try to help them, not try to go entice others to join in our sin. We have a choice to make. And our choice is to honor God and to honor others, or to dishonor God and dishonor others. So what's the choice that we're going to make today? I say we honor God, honor others, love God, and love others, and watch how down the line it leads to blessing and not to curse. I love you guys. We'll see you next week for Genesis chapter 10.